We talk a lot about the big forces shaping our world, gravity, the wind, the sun's energy. But have you ever stopped to think about the power of electrical charge, the way it's constantly flowing, kind of invisibly in everything around us, from a tiny leaf to, well, our own bodies?
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? And it's not just static, like when you get a shock from a doorknob. This is about how charge is constantly moving, how energy is actually gathered and used in nature and even, in our technology. It's like a hidden language of energy.
I like that. A hidden language. And in this deep dive, we're going to try to decode some of it. We've been looking into some pretty fascinating stuff. How trees, even individual leaves, work like charge systems, some really cool designs for energy harvesters inspired by nature, the mitochondria, those tiny powerhouses in our cells. Oh, and get this, the role of shapes, spirals, and cones in energy flow. Who knew, right?
And the coolest thing for you listening is this isn't about memorizing a bunch of facts. It's about seeing the world in a whole new way. Like energy isn't just something from a power plant. It's this fundamental movement of charge happening everywhere, from huge forests to, well, the tiniest parts of you. We're going to have some aha moments. And trust me, we'll keep it understandable. No super technical jargon overload.
So our mission today is to really get to the bottom of charge flow, what it is and what it means for all of us. Okay, let's dive in. And a good place to start is, how does nature collect and separate electrical charge?
Nature's had a long time to figure this out, right? Millions of years of evolution. Take a tree, for example. It's not just soaking up sunlight passively. That pointed shape of its canopy, it acts like an antenna, pulling in positive charge from the air. And at the same time, the roots are grounded, connected to the earth, which has a negative charge.
So it's like a giant living battery.
Exactly. That difference, the voltage gradient, keeps the charge flowing through the whole tree. And it's not just the overall shape, it's the branching. Those fractal patterns you see in the branches and even the veins of a leaf, they're key to how it all works.
Fractals. I always thought those were just cool patterns.
Oh, they're cool, all right, but they're also incredibly functional. That branching maximizes the surface area for distributing energy, and it actually reduces energy loss as those electrons and ions move around. It's like, think of a super efficient highway system for energy delivery in the tree.
Like a network of tiny roads,
Yeah.
making sure everything gets to where it needs to be. Okay, so we've got the tree acting like a big antenna. What about the leaves? The sources talked about how different leaves have evolved for charge flow too.
Oh, absolutely. So broadleaves, like you find on deciduous trees, they're usually in places with lots of energy, like think a sunny summer day. All that surface area lets them absorb a ton of charge, and that fuels rapid growth and all that photosynthesis going on.
Like a high bandwidth receiver,
Ah.
right? Pulling in a strong signal.
Perfect analogy. Now compare that to needles, like on evergreens. These guys are often in colder places, less energy available. Smaller surface area means slower, controlled charge flow. They're all about conserving water, keeping their ions balanced. They can't afford to exchange charge rapidly with the environment, could be disruptive.
Yeah, they're playing the long game, being super efficient. What about succulents, those plants with the thick, oval-shaped leaves? They're in dry places, right?
You got it. Those are like the ultimate adaptation for places where charge from the environment might be minimal and water is like gold, the thick leaves, the shape. It's all about holding onto water, storing charge internally, not so much about absorbing it quickly.
So efficient.
Yeah.
It's amazing how form follows function in nature, right?
Yeah.
Now, what about those conical shapes like some trees have, those pyramid shapes? The sources said those were good for charge flow too. Why is that?
It's all about how those shapes interact with the electric fields in the atmosphere. That pointed top of a cone or pyramid, it attracts and concentrates the charge, especially those positive ions floating around. And the shape also minimizes any turbulence as the charge flows upwards. Plus, it maximizes surface area, kind of like an amplifier for that electrical potential.
Okay, so we've seen how amazing nature is at this whole charge game. Can we copy that? Can we take those ideas and build our own energy harvesters?
That's where it gets really interesting. The sources actually outline some key design principles based on what we see in nature. First, just like we talked about, a tall, pointed, conical shape to attract charge, like our tree canopy.
So basically building our own antenna.
Exactly. And remember, the tree roots grounded in the earth. Same idea. Our harvester needs a grounded base to create that voltage difference, that gradient that makes the charge flow. Then we can borrow from those fractal branches and use branching conductive materials in our device.
So like a web of tiny wires spreading out from the main collector.
Yeah. And just like living things have ways to store charge, think about how cell membranes work. Our harvester needs some kind of capacitor or storage system, And of course, the materials themselves have to be chosen carefully so they transfer charge efficiently, maybe even using ideas from molecules like chlorophyll. Those are amazing at that.
It's like building a super efficient antenna and a battery, all in one. Now, the sources even had some estimates for how much power these things could make. What did they say?
You know, the electrical potential in the atmosphere is surprisingly high. It can be tens, even hundreds of volts per meter, depending on where you are, the weather, all that. They said a conical harvester, about 20 meters tall with optimized branching, could generate anything from milliwatts to kilowatts of power.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It is, and yeah, it depends a lot on the local conditions, like how many charged particles are in the air. But the main point is, if we can really nail those fractal branches, those really good charge-carrying materials, the efficiency could be incredible. We could be tapping directly into the electricity all around us.
That would be amazing. Okay, let's zoom in now way down to the microscopic level, to our own cells. The sources also talked about how this charge separation thing applies to human mitochondria. Just a quick refresher, what are mitochondria again?
They're basically the power plants inside our cells. Their job is to make something called ATP, which is basically the energy currency of the cell. And how they do it, it's kind of similar to those harvesters we were talking about. They move electrons along a chain of proteins, and this creates a charge difference across their membranes.
So like the voltage difference in a tree, but inside a tiny cell part?
Exactly. That charge gradient is the key to how they make ATP. Ions, specifically protons, flow across the membrane, and that powers this molecular machine called ATP synthase, which actually makes the ATP.
Got it. But the sources said if these gradients aren't maintained well, it can lead to things like aging and fatigue. How does that work?
It's like when a battery slowly loses its charge. If the mitochondrial membrane can't hold that gradient as well, the potential energy gets wasted. Less ATP gets made, and at the cell level, that can feel like fatigue. Over time, it's thought to be a big part of aging and some diseases.
So keeping those tiny batteries charged up is super important. But how do we do that? The sources talked about ways to actually improve charge flow in mitochondria.
Yeah, there are some cool strategies. One is to boost the membrane potential itself, make it stronger. That means optimizing the electron transport chain, making that gradient as good as it can be, giving the mitochondria the right molecules to carry those electrons, and also protecting them from damage from things like oxidative stress.
So making sure the wiring is good and the electrons can flow freely.
That's it. Another idea is to encourage the mitochondria to form networks inside the cell, kind of like linking them up. That can help distribute charge more efficiently. Then there's making sure they have enough of those key molecules like NAD+ and coenzyme Q10. Those are involved in carrying electrons.
Giving them the right fuel and the right tools.
Exactly. And there's even some research into using things like pulsed electromagnetic fields, PEMF, and bioelectric stimulation. It's like giving them an external boost, helping the charge move along. And finally, there's work being done on improving the proteins that transport ions across the membrane, maybe using specialized proteins or even nanotechnology in the future.
Wow. It's like we're learning to fine-tune these tiny circuits inside us. Okay, let's zoom back out now. The sources really emphasized that natural energy systems are all about charge flow, not just about absorbing light. Why is that so important to understand?
It's a different way of thinking about energy, you know? Yeah, things like photosynthesis start with light, but then it's all about managing and moving that electrical charge. Those cones and pyramids we talked about, they're not just passively collecting light, they're creating and shaping the electric field, concentrating the charge. The top usually gets positive, the base stays connected to the negative ground.
So they're making the energy flow, not just receiving it.
Exactly. And those fractal patterns, they're crucial for maximizing surface area. That's where all the charge exchange happens, in a leaf, in a cell membrane, anywhere. It's a network that minimizes resistance and gets the energy where it needs to go. Think about those Lichtenberg figures, the branching patterns you see with electrical discharges. That's how charge naturally wants to move.
So it's not just about attracting energy, it's about guiding it, making the paths for it to flow.
Yes. The sources were very clear about that. Charge flows towards higher electrical potential. It's not about sucking energy in, it's about setting up pathways, guiding the movement.
This is really cool. One of the sources mentioned something interesting. It was almost like a reader question. They were wondering about a connection between rotation and charge dynamics. Is there something to that?
That's a really smart observation. When you have differences in charge, it creates asymmetry in the system. And when that charge wants to balance out, but it's stuck in a certain shape, that can create rotational momentum. It's like The imbalance naturally wants to resolve itself through movement, and sometimes that movement is spinning.
So an uneven charge distribution can actually make something spin.
It can. And that has some really cool implications for energy harvesting. If we can build things with the right asymmetries, use those natural gradients, we might be able to make things spin and generate energy without wind or water or anything like that.
Mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We've been talking about all these different shapes, but the Fibonacci spiral keeps coming up.
Yeah.
What's the connection between that and electrical charge?
The Fibonacci spiral, it's just so amazing. That logarithmic spiral, it seems to be a universal pattern. You see it everywhere in nature, from tiny things to huge things. And it's all about efficient energy distribution. It creates these gradients that increase logarithmically, so you lose very little energy along the way.
And you mentioned how rotation can come from uneven charge distribution. How does the spiral shape play into that?
The way the spiral is shaped, it inherently creates an uneven charge distribution. Each turn of the spiral is related to the one before it by this special ratio, the golden ratio, and that sets up these differences in electrical potential that can drive rotation. It's mind-blowing. You see these spirals from the quantum level all the way up to galaxies. It's telling us something about how to design things, maybe energy harvesters, to be super efficient.
It's like nature's giving us the blueprint. The sources really highlighted this idea of charge asymmetry being the engine behind rotation. Can you explain that in more detail?
Sure. So imagine you have this uneven distribution of charge. It's like a built-in potential energy, a push in a certain direction. Just like water flows downhill, charge wants to flow from high potential to low potential. But if that flow is constrained by a shape or by magnetic fields, it can't just flow in a straight line. It might start to flow in a circle, to spin, as it tries to balance out within those boundaries.
So can you give us some real-world examples of that happening?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the spin of an electron. That's a fundamental property, and it's thought to come from its internal charge distribution. The magnetic fields around planets, those are created by the movement of charged stuff deep inside. Even galaxies, the way they rotate is affected by the charge distribution in the magnetic fields. And we've seen it in biology, too. Those charge gradients in cells can make molecular machines spin.
So it's like this imbalance in charge is what gets things moving at all levels. So how can we take that and design things that use it? How do you build a device that uses charge asymmetry to create rotation?
That's the challenge, right? We need to be clever about it. We need to design things with built-in asymmetries that guide the charge flow in a circle. It could be about arranging materials with different conductivity, using shapes that naturally induce rotation, even manipulating magnetic fields.
Okay, let's get specific. What would a charge rotation energy harvester actually look like? How would it work?
To really make it work, we'd probably need a multi-layered approach, a way to create and control these asymmetries. You could start with the shape of the collector itself, maybe using those Fibonacci spirals to get things spinning naturally. Then you could get even more advanced using arrays of quantum dots. Those are tiny things that can control charge flow at a very fine level. You could arrange them to make the charge flow in a circle. And in the future, maybe even AI could come into play, self-organizing systems that adjust the charge distribution in real time to optimize the rotation.
That's getting pretty futuristic. One of the sources talked about spiral charge gradients and how we could use those ideas to both harvest energy and boost our own energy systems. What's that all about?
This is where it gets really exciting, because we're taking what we see in nature and applying it to both technology and to ourselves.
Yeah.
The idea is to use those spiral gradients with their perfect energy distribution, logarithmic regression, and all that to build better energy harvesters and to make our own biological processes more efficient.
That's like a two-pronged approach.
Exactly. For cells, imagine building artificial electron transport chains that are shaped like spirals, just like in nature, or designing ion channels in cell membranes using Fibonacci patterns. And at a bigger scale, think about how spiral-shaped nerves and blood vessels could be contributing to our overall energy efficiency.
And how would we actually put these ideas into practice?
There are some really interesting possibilities. In biology, we could use targeted electromagnetic frequencies to enhance the way energy flows in our cells. We could develop biofeedback methods to track and optimize those charge gradients. And for energy harvesting, imagine wearable tech with spiral-shaped collectors pulling energy from the environment.
It's like we're starting to tap into these deeper levels of how energy works. Now, one of the sources went even further, talking about mitochondria as quantum charge gradient systems. What does that mean?
It's a really cool way of looking at it. It means that we have to think about those electrons in mitochondria not like little balls rolling along, but like quantum objects. Their movement is probabilistic, meaning it's not always predictable, and they can do things like quantum tunneling, passing through barriers that they shouldn't be able to according to classical physics, and they can also exhibit quantum coherence, where they kind of link up and transfer energy super efficiently.
So it's not just a simple flow of electrons, it's much more complex and interconnected.
Exactly. Those quantum effects, like tunneling and coherence, they seem to be essential for how energy moves in the electron transport chain. And understanding that opens up new possibilities for improving things. Maybe we can use special frequencies to enhance that coherence, or use AI to map out the energy landscape inside the mitochondria.
Wow, it's like learning to speak the language of our cells at a deeper level. Okay, let's go back to those shapes for a minute. We talked about cones and pyramids. One of the sources really emphasized their importance for energy flow. Why are those shapes so special?
They're just perfect for creating and maintaining that charge separation, which is all important. The shape concentrates charge at the top, creating a big voltage difference compared to the base. They also interact with electric and magnetic fields in a really beneficial way, guiding those field lines to help with energy capture and transfer. And they even seem to encourage rotation, which we know is a good thing.
So if we wanted to build an energy harvester, a more detailed one, what would that look like?
One idea that was described is a tall, conical collector with a fractal surface. The fractals are key. That's for maximizing surface area to interact with the charge in the air. The base would be grounded, and the tip would be super sharp to concentrate the charge. And you'd want to use really good conductive materials like graphene and copper mesh to help with the flow.
It's like a high-tech version of a tree. Okay, let's talk about our own mitochondria again. The sources had some pretty specific ideas about how to optimize them using charge optimization. What are some of the things you could do?
The big goal is to make that voltage difference across the mitochondrial membrane as strong as possible to get those electrons flowing and that ATP synthase spinning. One thing is to really support that electron transport chain, give it the right molecules like the precursors to NAD plus sham, and protect it from damage with antioxidants like molecular hydrogen. There's also research into using things like methylene blue, which helps with the electron flow.
So it's like making sure the engine has the right fuel and is running smoothly.
Exactly. Another thing is to increase the proton gradient itself. That's the driving force behind ATP production. Cold exposure, magnetic fields, PEMF, those can all help. And having enough of the right ions, like magnesium and potassium, is important for that membrane to function properly.
It's like boosting the voltage of our cellular batteries.
Yeah.
What about the ATP synthase itself, that spinning machine that makes ATP?
Yeah, that's a key player. We want to make sure the protons flow through it easily, nothing's slowing it down. Some research suggests that even the type of water surrounding the mitochondria matters. Structured water, sometimes called exclusion zone water, might help with charge flow, and there's some really interesting ideas about deuterium-depleted water, which might make the ATP synthase spin more easily. And of course, good old exercise, especially high-intensity intervals, that's a great way to boost those mitochondria.
And the sources also talked about the physical structure of the mitochondria themselves.
Right. Mitochondria aren't static. They can change shape, fuse together, even expand their membranes in a fractal way to make more surface area. Things like fasting and autophagy can help clear out the damaged ones and make room for new ones. And there are compounds, like PQQ and CoQ10, that can stimulate mitochondrial growth. Oxygen therapy can also help them function better.
It's like we're tending to this inner garden of energy. One of the sources went even further out there, suggesting that charge differentials might actually be the cause of rotation, not just in cells, but at all scales, from atoms to galaxies. What's the thinking there?
It's a pretty radical idea, but it's based on the idea that any imbalance of charge creates a force. That force creates an electric field, and that wants to push things around to even things out. And if that push happens in a certain way, within a certain shape, it can make things spin.
So the same force could be making an electron spin and a galaxy rotate.
That's the idea. It could explain electron spin at the quantum level, the way electrons orbit atoms, even the rotation of entire galaxies. It's a very elegant idea, tying everything together.
And we keep coming back to the Fibonacci spiral. The sources revisited that again, really emphasizing its importance as a template for charge flow. Could you sum up why it's so special?
It's just the perfect shape for energy flow. It minimizes energy loss over distance, maximizes surface area, creates these smooth gradients, and even can induce rotation.
Mm.
It's like nature's perfect design. We see it in DNA, galaxies, plants, hurricanes, even in the way water flows.
It's everywhere.
It is. It's telling us something about how energy wants to move. And the really crazy thing is, some scientists think that spirals might not just be about transferring energy efficiently, they might actually be able to reorganize energy in a way that we don't fully understand yet. That's where the idea of infinite energy might come from, not creating energy out of nothing, but tapping into something much deeper.
That's pretty mind-blowing. Okay, we've covered a lot today. What are the key things you want people to take away from this deep dive?
I think the big thing is that charge flow is fundamental. It's happening everywhere, all the time, from the tiniest things to the biggest things. It's how nature powers itself, and it's how we're starting to design new technologies. And those shapes, the fractals and the spirals, those are nature's blueprints for making it all work. We can learn a lot from that, both for building new things and for understanding ourselves better.
This has been an amazing conversation. And for everyone listening, here's a final thought. If charge flow is as fundamental as we've been discussing, how does that change the way we think about energy, about life, about the universe itself? And if it's really the driving force behind so much, what other truths that we take for granted might need to be re-examined? Think about it. Look around you. See if you can spot the charge flow happening all around you. This deep dive has given us a powerful new way to see the world.